Thank you. Hi, everyone. It's good to have everybody here again. I would fix the issue with the link as soon as we start so that would not take the time of those that were able to join us very early. Thank you so much for coming again to this Space Conversation series facilitated by Space Hubs Africa. So just right before we go into our conversation, just a quick rundown. Space Hubs Africa is a startup and organization that is focused on building the Africa space ecosystem. So we had a unique vision to provide access to tools and resources that those that are new to the African space market can use the information we provide to navigate the space business and the space market in Africa. So in order to do this, we focus on three thematic areas, which is the learn content, part of what we are doing right now. So we provide an avenue where people can learn about space. So even people that may not know anything about the space sector, have zero knowledge about the space industry, we provide a platform where you can learn as much as you can about the African space sector in particular. Then the second thematic focus that we have is the connect. So we understand that space is an emerging field in Africa, and there can be shortage of mentorship and community. Some people may not know anybody in the industry in their country. So we try to provide a platform where people can meet and connect with other people in the space sector. They can meet with experts, with professionals. For students and undergrads, this is actually very important for them. And even for those that may be professionals in different fields, but are not very conversant with the space industry. And then finally, we have to build thematic focus of our organization. So we currently consult with other space businesses that are trying to grow in Africa, and we provide access to resources. Like I say, we do business analysis, and we also provide academic resources and tools to help these people build their startups here in Africa. So it's very good to have everybody join us on this conversation today. So today we are having a conversation. So it's not a technical webinar. There are not going to be big words and jargons about rockets and things like that. So it's basically a conversation, although we have a topic to guide our discussion. And the topic for today is the effect of international cooperation and development assistance on the African space program. So our guest speaker is already here. If you can put on your video, Ma, so we can see you. And she's going to be discussing this topic. I'm going to give a brief introduction of our speaker, and then in the course of the conversation we are going to know her better. So advocate, I think here in Nigeria we mostly refer to lawyers as baristas, but I think something else in South Africa. So yeah. Icho Kealotswe-Matlou, pardon me if I'm not pronouncing your name correctly. So she is an independent legal and policy expert in space law, and admitted advocate of the High Courts of South Africa and Botswana. She's a member of the Johannesburg Bar, the Botswana Law Society, and the International Institute of Space Law. So as you can see, she has an international spectrum to her legal practice. So she's currently a non-executive director of the South African National Space Agency, which we will all believe that, and we would undoubtedly agree that it's one of the leading space agencies in the continent. And she is a council member at the South African Council for Space Affairs. And she contributed a chapter, The Rule of Law in Outer Space, the call for an international space authority, in the book War and Peace in Outer Space, published by the prestigious University of Oxford in 2021. She has also served as a co-drafter of the book Global Space Governance, an international study released by Springer in 2018. And she presides yearly over the Manfred Lack Space Law Moot Court competitions. I was once one of the participants for the Manfred Lack Space Law Moot competition a few years back. So I'm particularly very excited to be here to host this webinar. Yeah. So,
really? What year was that?
That was in 2019.
Okay.
Yes. So thank you so much for joining us again, Ma. It's very, very good to have you here join us today. So I'm going to let you have the floor now. So I'll quickly share her presentation with us. Okay. So if you have any questions, you can always send them to the chat box while she's still speaking. And then we are going to take questions after the brief presentation. So we are all going to have a nice time. Thank you very much, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Nelly. And thank you to Space Hubs Africa for the invitation. And thank you to your audience as well for taking the time. Indeed, international cooperation is a very important topic and one that requires quite a lot of time to delve into in detail. But I'll try my best today to cover the salient points with the time that we have. As an introduction, when you observe the current developments, it is quite evident that African nations have a potential to become leading competitors in the space industry. And before I continue, can you hear me?
It's loud and clear.
Can you see my video?
Yes, we can.
Okay, all right. And I say this, having considered the following factors. Factor number one, the continent's rapidly expanding space industry. I was reading recently in the africanews.com that the demand for satellite capacity in Africa is growing really fast in order to fill in the enormous gaps in communication, education, and science, and that the African space industry is expected to top $22 billion by the year 2026. And just in 2022 alone, countries allocated a total of $539 million to their respective space programs. That is a substantial amount of money that is going to come in, that is being spent and that is going to come in a few years into the continent. Secondly, the amount of institutional knowledge that we already have available. It is a very fortunate time that African nations come in at a time when foundational knowledge of space and technology already exists. So there's no need for us to reinvent the wheel in order to progress and lead in space. The continent's space agencies can immediately implement and build upon what is already established. Thirdly, Africa's large youth population that is poised to become the next generation of space industry innovators. 70% of sub-Saharan Africa are under 30. This means we have the youngest population on Earth. With a space focus on STEM education, this young population can learn how to design, how to build and launch satellites into space. They can have their own startup companies and turn the continent's economy around faster in leaps and bounds. The fourth factor is the geographical locations of most countries. Most of the African countries have remote locations that can host ground stations for astronomy, space operations, space Earth observations, and space science purposes. Other examples are the East African nations, which lie in close proximity to the equator, where the world rotates faster and gives spacecraft a boost when launching. This factor alone makes these countries ideal locations for launching services. So all these factors they stand to Africa's advantage. But then the question becomes, how do we unlock them to our benefit? And the answer lies in international cooperation. Collaborations. As in real estate, we always say locations. But perhaps let us first consider a bit of background as to why international cooperation is actually key to unlocking these opportunities. The contribution that the space industry can make to progress on the continent is acknowledged by the United Nations itself in the United Nations Development Goals, and most importantly, it is acknowledged by the African Union in its Agenda 2063 as one of its 15 key programs. So far, numerous unrelated space initiatives to cooperate among and between various African Union countries have already taken place. For instance, we have the Regional African Satellite Communication Organization, famously known as RASCOM. This was an early regional initiative launched in 1992 with 45 members. It launched one satellite in 2007 and another in 2010. We also have the African Resource Management Constellation, the ARMC, a joint project founded in 2003 by Algeria, Kenya, Nigeria, and South Africa. And then Nigeria subsequently launched the NIGESAT-2 with the intention that it becomes part of this constellation. However, what is clear is that the above initiatives, as good as they are or were, achieve very limited success, mainly due to the lack of coordination and lack of proper standardization of policy and strategies. Hence, we see now the African Union, in an effort to promote policy and strategy cooperation and coordination within the African Union member states. In 2017, it established this African Space Agency Act. And the act itself establishes the African Space Agency, and it creates a governance structure and strategy for the continent-wide space activity. The agency is intended to have a coordination role rather than being directly involved with satellite production and space launches. So what we have here is the contribution and foundation that was laid down by the African Union, giving the continent a chance to progress and succeed in space use and exploration. There is a policy, an African policy, which determines which areas to focus on and why. There is a strategy which outlines which programs and performance indicators to pursue. And states are not forced to take up these policies. The states can dovetail this framework to suit their own needs. So the African Union has to be commended for its relentless pursuit and commitment to space development, which has accelerated the growth of Africa's space industry such that we currently have more than 20 space agencies or space-related institutions established in Africa over the past 5 years or so. There is also the legal framework that is in place. The legal framework, we are talking here about the foundational treaties, which is the Outer Space Treaty and its associated agreements. I'll not delve into them because they are not for our purposes today. But a very important convention is the Cape Town Convention on International Interest in Mobile Equipment, which now has a protocol attached to it. And the protocol focuses on matters specific to space assets. We call this the Space Protocol. And the main thing is that space activities are very, very expensive. And they require substantial amount of investments in order to be carried out. So this protocol provides a legal framework for creating, registering, and enforcing security interests in space assets, such as satellites and space launchers. It provides a more predictable and efficient regime for financing and leasing such space objects, and to enhance the protection of creditors' rights in case of default or insolvency. The Convention establishes an international registry for registration of these interests, which enables creditors to assert their claims and facilitate the recovery of equipment in case of default. So it's really there to assist investors so that they can be secure in their investments, and they can know that their investments are protected. They know that there is a standard, an enhanced of financing opportunity for the space entities themselves. An important aspect that we get from this space protocol is the standardized legal framework. It establishes a set of uniform rules and procedures applicable to space asset transactions. This harmonization of legal principles and requirements across participating countries simplifies cross-border transactions and reduces the legal complexities associated with financing and leasing space assets. So it provides a consistent and internationally recognized legal framework, promoting market confidence, very important, and facilitating international cooperation, our topic for today. So the protocol itself promotes international cooperation and coordination in space-related matters. It encourages countries to adopt common standards and practices, fostering collaboration and harmonization across different legal systems. And this can facilitate international partnerships, joint ventures, and cross-border transactions, ultimately benefiting the global space industry. So I had to give you this brief background so that you understand where international cooperation comes from and why it is important. And so there are key impact areas of international cooperation. One of them is infrastructure development. We find that international cooperation can contribute to the development of space-related infrastructure in Africa. This includes establishment of satellite ground stations, mission control centers, and research facilities. An improved infrastructure enhances the capability and reliability of Africa's space program. This is the thing that pulls in the investors to come in. And also collaborations take into consideration the geographical location of the nation. As I mentioned earlier, that there are East African countries that lie in close proximity to the equator. We find that in January of this year, Djibouti and the Hong Kong Aerospace Technology Group announced an agreement to build a new spaceport in northern Djibouti within the next 5 years. This is an example of taking advantage of the geographical location of a nation. And then we also have partnerships between SANSA and NASA. SANSA is the South African National Space Agency. And they have a partnership, they have actually renewed this partnership in lunar exploration, which is set to become Africa's first deep space ground station in the Western Cape. And this deep space ground station will host one of 3 communication antennas strategically placed around the globe to ensure space tracking and communication between astronauts on NASA Artemis spacecraft to the moon and those who will subsequently come to work on and around the lunar surface. We have other collaborations that talk to infrastructure development, such as the Square Kilometer Array, the SKA project, which is an international effort between South Africa and Australia to build the world's largest radio telescope. The scale of the Square Kilometer Array represents a huge leap forward in both engineering, research, and development towards building and delivering a radio telescope, and will deliver a correspondingly transformational increase in science capability when operational. Deploying thousands of radio telescopes in 3 unique configurations, it will enable astronomers to monitor the sky in unprecedented detail and survey the entire sky thousands of times faster than any system currently in existence. This is amazing. It's amazing, and it shows you what international cooperation can do for the African space program. Another key impact area is the technology transfer and capacity building. You see, international cooperation allows African countries to access advanced technologies and expertise from more established space agencies and organizations. This transfer of knowledge and technology enables African nations to leapfrog certain developmental stages and accelerate their space program, an advantage that most spacefaring countries never had. Development assistance programs often focus on capacity building, providing training and educational opportunities for African scientists, engineers, and technicians. This helps build a skilled workforce capable of designing, building, and operating systems and infrastructure. And there are a number of institutions that are leading efforts to build capacity and skill in the continent, such as the International Space University in France, which offers programs that provide a holistic overview of the complex global space sector. We also have the Cape Peninsula University of Technology, which is a satellite program hosted by the French South African Institute of Technology. And it has become a leader in the field of space technology. The Institute is there for teaching, research, and development, which works to contribute towards the creation of knowledge and transfer of technology between South Africa and France. And in 2013, they made history when they launched Africa's first nanosatellite called TepisoSat, or ZARCube-1. And in 2018, they launched ZARCube-2. And recently, beginning of 2022, they launched a constellation of 3 satellites called MDA-SAT. And then lastly, we have the African Space Institute, which has been recently created to build capacity in space policy, in law, and in strategy, to name but a few institutions. Another key impact area is data and communication services. Collaboration with international partners enables African countries to access satellite data for various applications, including weather forecasting, natural resource management, agriculture, and disaster response. These data services help address socio-economic challenges and support sustainable development in the region. We have an example of the Rwanda Space Agency, which recently announced that SpaceX Starlink had been licensed and approved to provide the country with internet and connectivity services. This clearly demonstrates the agency's leveraging space enterprises to bring connectivity to remote and underserved areas in Rwanda. Also, as of January 2023, Starlink operates in Nigeria to help the nation achieve its goal of offering broadband services to all residents by 2025. So these demonstrate good examples of African nations collaborating with international partners to access communication services. And fourthly, we have economic social benefits as a key impact area, because a well-developed space program can contribute to economic growth and social development in Africa, and will stimulate innovation, attract investment, create high-skilled job opportunities in the skills sector and related industries. And therefore, in conclusion, international cooperation and development assistance does play a crucial role in supporting Africa's space program by providing access to technology, to expertise, capacity building, infrastructure, data services, collaboration opportunities, and socio-economic benefits. There's a whole lot more that we can talk about, but I would like to stop here to allow for questions if there are any. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Ms. Icho. It has been a very very enlightening session. I don't know if anybody has any question. Just feel free to put the question on the chat box, or you could always raise your hands or draw my attention to your question if you want to put on your video and speak. Will also allow you to do that. Thank you so much. In the meantime, while we wait for your questions, I'll just ask a few questions from my end. So this is a very interactive session. Yes, Ms. Icho, please, could you tell us more about your initial interest in the space industry? So right before we talk about international collaboration, just to know you a bit better. So what led to your current involvement as a legal expert with a focus on space? Yeah.
What led to my interest in space? I'll say this came from my passion for children and their development and protecting and seeking to secure their future. And then in my studies, I realized that there are substantial benefits that can be reaped from space technology and space applications. In a way, we can use space to overcome our challenges of poverty, of helplessness, of economical challenges. So I believe that also with proper governance and institutional architecture, space policy can be employed to empower children through education, through technology, global cooperation, environmental sustainability, and humanitarian efforts. And thereby, by leveraging the benefits of space exploration and research, we can inspire and educate and create a better future for the next generation. So through global cooperation, also the partnerships we create, we can promote cultural exchange, mutual understanding, and diplomatic ties, which can have a positive impact on children's perceptions of global citizenship and promote peace and harmony. And the collaborative space missions would also provide opportunities for scientific discoveries and breakthroughs that can benefit humanity as a whole, including children. And my main focus now is in trying to ensure that there's no weaponization of outer space. I've written a chapter now on the rule of law in outer space that is covered in the book, The War and Peace in Outer Space. Just to sensitize people on the dangers of placing nuclear weapons in outer space and ensuring that people and countries do not do that. They take accountability and use space responsibly. Because otherwise we might just obliterate our own world and have nothing to leave for our children.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Imaginable.
That was long and winding, but yeah. That's my interest in space. That's why I'm here.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing. Thank you so much for sharing. Now we understand the background that you are coming from. So let's talk a bit about your country. So before we talk about Africa, so I am sure, like I said earlier, South Africa is one of the leading countries with space capacity in Africa. So what would you say has been the major driving factor behind this? Like, what can other countries learn from South Africa? What can other agencies? So I see some of my friends here that work in the space sector, and some of them they have connections. Like I see Christian. So I'm sure some of them can go back to their countries and maybe share one or two principles or one or two things that we can learn from South Africa. So what can African countries learn from the South African space agency, or from the South African space program as a whole?
Well, the South African space program benefits from
sorry about that.
a legacy of space that predates their democracy. And also, currently there is a political will to see through the space programs and to see through the space policy. It has a clearly defined space policy and strategy. And it has the council and the space agency that both the council looks to regulating the space industry, and then the space agency implements the space program. So the two arms work together, but they're doing different roles that complement each other. And the space agency's program prioritize a few areas. For instance, they prioritize the Earth observations, space operations, they prioritize space science. And then they have a robust admin system where the efforts of all these programs are centralized, and there is efficiency and coordination. Most importantly, they value partnerships. Partnerships is something that they go out there to look for and secure, because they know that with collaborations, they can do everything. Right now, through collaborations, the space science already hosts the space weather, the regional space weather center in Africa. And through the space ops, they host and operate a number of space missions for different countries. And this could only be done through partnerships and collaborations. They even go into Africa and collaborate with other African nations. The space agency goes hard in collaborations. The council itself attends all the international committees, like the UN Committee on Space Affairs. So they really take part in worldly matters that other spacefaring nations take part in.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think one of the most important thing I got there is partnership, collaboration, which is one of the key words that we are focusing on today's session. So for those of you that are just joining us, thank you so much and welcome to the session. We are currently discussing the effect of international collaboration in the African Space Program, and it's been very insightful so far. If you have any questions, feel free to raise your hand or send a question to the chat box. So for my next question, can you please tell us about your thoughts on the China-Africa collaboration with regards to space launches in recent years?
China.
Yeah, you know the thing about China and all the
why are you picking on China? There's also US collaboration. China. Firstly, the UN has established a space policy and strategy. So nations must do their best to understand these strategies and policies and align themselves with them to develop institutional, regional cooperation within the African Union community. But that is not to say that they cannot collaborate with other international countries. Sovereignty is a priority, and national policies and priorities of different states ought to be respected. So on the face of it, there's really nothing wrong with these collaborations, whether it be China or whether you be US, Germany, whichever country. And China has been actively collaborating with African nations in space technology and applications for a while now. For example, China has helped Algeria and Nigeria to launch their Earth observation satellites by providing technical assistance, training, and satellite data services. So this is all good collaborations. And then also, if you compare, one significant project of cooperation also between South Africa and NASA is the South African National Antarctic Program called Operation Icebridge, that studies the effects of climate change in the Antarctica. So these collaborations are very, very helpful, and we encourage them. If there are any issues that should be considered, these countries must look to ratifying and implementing the space protocol that we talked about earlier, which will help to govern the contractual rights of the parties. Because at the end of the day, it's the intentions of the parties that matter. Even though these are bilateral, they are still governed by contractual law at the heart of them. So in my view, the collaborations are good and they should be encouraged. It's just that people, the countries themselves ought to look at protecting themselves through means of these space protocols and other treaties that we have that govern contracts.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So I know you've mentioned the African Space Agency when you were giving your presentation, your initial presentation, but if you could just shed a little bit more light on the how it will affect international collaboration, because the agency has been recently launched, and I think the entire structure has been completed in Egypt, and it raised a lot of enthusiasm and hope, and we're all very, very excited. But it took a while before the AFSA, like it's been abbreviated, could come into fruition. So in the coming years, do you think there will be any progress at all in regards to how more countries, let's talk about countries that are not very spacefaring, like how do you think the African Space Agency can help other countries? Like let's talk about Togo, Cameroon, all these countries that are not very spacefaring. Like what do you think the AFSA is going to do to help promote this international collaboration within Africa, not with other partners like maybe the European Space Agency and the rest, like within Africa? Just a little bit of light on that.
This African Space Agency, it's a very good initiative. And I think by its very nature, it operates on the basis of international cooperation. So it's there to coordinate and promote the African participation in international efforts for the peaceful uses of space and science and technology for the welfare of humanity. And one of its main purposes will be to support member states in building their space programs and coordinating space efforts across the continent. So countries that do not have space policies at the moment would be assisted should they require this assistance. They'll be encouraged to also participate. And not only spacefaring countries should be the ones that benefit. It should be those countries that do not have any space policies or legal frameworks. So I believe that one of the purposes would be to coordinate to ensure that the countries that are a bit developed in the space area can partner and assist those that do not have it. That should be one of the main focus areas. And it will promote strategic intercontinental partnerships. I hope that answers your questions.
Absolutely.
By engaging members in space-related activities and research in Africa with the aim of fostering cooperation and most importantly, avoiding duplication of efforts.
Yeah. I just have two more questions. I think one would be with regards to the Artemis Accord that NASA recently initiated, and I think Nigeria just signed the Artemis Accord. And so what should African countries be bothered about lunar exploration? I don't have any issue with lunar exploration, but I'm trying to be very realistic. If I want to, play the role of a critic on what we do in the African space sector. So why are we so concerned about the Artemis Accords? And yeah, and the second part of this question is, most African countries just completely exempt themselves from signing international space treaties. Like, we have nothing to do with this. And what are your thoughts on that? Yeah, thank you so much.
The Artemis Accords. These are a NASA-led framework outlining best practices for sustainable space exploration. It basically builds on the Outer Space Treaty and its related agreement, and encourages cooperation and responsible behavior in outer space. So yes, we have Nigeria and Rwanda that signed their accords in late 2022. And like all the other space communities, it's there to promote and develop institutional and industrial cooperation within the Artemis community. So if you become a member of this community, it means you align yourself with their principles, which is cooperation and responsible behavior in outer space. And like we have with the African Union community, the countries align themselves with the policies and the strategies of this community. I personally do not see anything that should stop a country from joining or signing the accords if it aligns with their own nation's priorities and policies, because the nation's policies and strategies are also very, very imperative.
Okay, but I noticed that South Africa is yet to say anything on the accords. And I think South Africa is more advanced when it comes to space than Nigeria and Rwanda. So I'm just a bit confused.
Well, it's like I'm saying, it's their policies, and whether it goes along and aligns with what they want to achieve.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. I will have one more question from my end before we take question from the audience. Okay. Yes. Just some parting words for young people who have an interest in the space industry but are having difficulty accessing opportunities. I know this is not exactly within the conversation we're having on international cooperation, but opportunities, and you already said that Africa has the youngest population and the youth play a critical role in participation in space. But what would you say to young people trying to get involved in space but don't have enough access to opportunities in the industry?
Oh, well, like I was saying earlier, 70% of sub-Saharan Africa is under the age of 30. So our future is very young. And this youth must take advantage of all STEM education that they can get their hands on. There are workshops, there are courses, symposiums that are held all over the continent. They must take advantage of that. There are institutions that offer programs and courses, such as the ones that I alluded to earlier, that they can join and find out how they can be assisted. I believe there is material also online. There is material from a platform like yours where they can find assistance. There's also the African SKA Human Capital Development Program that has awarded grants, close to 1,000 grants since 2017. And it's still doing that for studies in astronomy and engineering, from undergraduates to postdoctoral level. So they have the SKA Africa project in Kenya, in Mozambique, Madagascar, and Mauritius. So the young people must take advantage of all these courses that are available for them. And they must learn how to design and build and launch satellites and start their own startup companies.
Yeah, exactly. We have a big issue with startups. We don't have enough startups in Africa. That's a very important point to note. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So we'll take questions from the audience, concerns, clarifications, and even contributions. We're here to discuss space. So I'll take Mr. Anyekan Udosen. You can just kindly unmute yourself and feel free to ask your question, put on your camera.
All right, thank you, Nelly. And kudos to the guest speaker. That was a wonderful delivery. And I don't want to take much time. This is quite an interesting arena, or what would I call it? Yes, it's an arena. Space. So, and there's a lot of things to be gotten from there because it's still on tap. My question is questions too. I want to drop them at once before I shut down. First is how do we deal with the international hypocrisy when it comes to dealing with Africa and the things that concerns Africa? And the second one is Nelly will be very much averse with what I'm saying because she's a Nigerian. And so how can the uneducated boy in Nnewi that has high intellect and can truly contribute to space tap into this program that we're just talking about? That's true. Please, you can, Nelly, you can help out with analyze my second question. The first one is she understands.
Definitely.
Yeah, I did get your questions.
Yes.
About the first one is about how do we deal with the hypocrisy of the
international community. Yes. Or specifically the Western Wall. Let me pinpoint them. The Western Wall. Yes.
I wouldn't want to pinpoint, but as I was saying earlier, we must consider that the African Union has established policy for the continent and a strategy for it. So we, as nations of Africa, we must work with the African Union and cooperate amongst ourselves so that we forge our own path and we work together. Because there's nothing that we need to reinvent anymore. Everything is already there. We just have to tap into it and implement. But if we cooperate and work together with what the African Union has already put in place, I think we can deal with the hypocrisy. We don't even have to consider it. It would be a non-issue. That's my answer to your first questions. I hope it satisfies you. As to your second question of a child who is in a remote area, how would they be able to contribute and plug into a platform like this one? You see how the data and communication services are assessed by the examples of Rwanda and Nigeria. If countries could also collaborate and access those communication services and provide them to those remote and underserved areas, those children can plug into a platform like this with ease. Thank you.
Okay, just for a follow-up, because of your answer to the second question, how can that be done? That's I need a practical suggestion. Yeah, countries we because a lot of times we talk about policies and stuff, and then we end there. Practically, how can that be attained? That those things could be made available for that child, because there are so many intelligent children in the rural. Nelly knows we have people that have built cars from the scratch.
Okay.
And these people can, if they are orientated in space, they can do wonders. I know Nigeria is a great nation. Not because I'm a Nigerian, but I know. So
Yeah.
I
want a
understand
practical.
that frustration, and I get you. And I think that could be a topic for another day completely.
Okay.
We can take
all
the
right.
whole day.
Yeah,
It's okay.
just a little bit of suggestion. Since you're talking about a particular way that the issue can be solved. So in
Yes.
Nigeria, our space agency has different space centers. So we have Center for Space Propulsion, Center for Satellite Navigation, different space centers. And we have one particular, I think it's in Enugu, and it's the Center for Basic Space Science Education. So what they do in the Center for Space Basic Space Science Education is to promote space awareness for children and young people. They carry out space education outreaches. So in essence, in terms of the structure, they have the mandate to promote space education and to hone these talents in space science in the country. So now, like you said, it's all policy. They do some work. I follow some of the work they do in the CBSS, but the issue with the Nigeria space program in terms of space education, like, it's the same issue with all sectors in Nigeria. Finances, the government will tell you they don't have enough money. Space is a lot of money to hone talent, to go out there, conduct outreaches, to source out these talents, to give them grants, to, carry out their what's it called, inventions, to build their inventions and things like that. It's money. And the Nigerian space program at the time, we are facing a lot of financial challenges, at least from what the feedback we always get from the authorities and the government. Money. So we hope that it's a gradual process. Recently, I think just a day ago, on the news, that the Nigeria space budget has been increased by 5% from what was obtainable the last time. So we hope there'll be time, if the country can generate enough resources, garner enough resources for a space projects, then space education will automatically have more impacts in the country. So that's just one practical measure. I hope we have both collectively answered and addressed your question. So
I'll leave it there. It's not exhaustive, but it's okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. We take a question from Imawa Ibok, and then we'll take from David Mubrena. I think those are the only two hands that are up at the moment. So Imawa, please feel free to ask your question.
Okay, good evening. Thank you, Ma, for this privilege again. You speak very well. Okay, my question goes like this. Where did you deploy or provision this infrastructure? Hello?
Hello?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. You said something about deploy and positioning infrastructure, but
yeah, I asked a question like, where do you deploy your infrastructure? Or because in most cases, like what I do, we mostly deploy infrastructure on clouds. Is it that concerning space, we are going to deploy the same thing on cloud, or where? I don't understand. I want you to explain this to me very well.
I also don't know. I don't know where we deploy that infrastructure.
Oh, okay. I think this is from the slide on infrastructure. If you're talking about a software, she was referring to a physical infrastructure, like a physical structure, like a ground station. Yes. So she was not talking about some software, because I think you're a developer, and no, this is real structures, like real structures. But thank you so much. So the structures are deployed wherever the need is necessary. We have a ground station at the Defense Space Administration here in Nigeria. So wherever the need is necessary, then the structures will be built. Like, I think that should answer the question.
Thank you, Nelly.
David, yes, please, your question.
Okay, it's not really a question, Sha, but it's a kind of answer to that man that was talking about how to get someone that is in Nnewi that doesn't have an education how to get him into space.
All
Yeah.
right.
So there's this thing that the Lagos State government is doing currently, which is very, very awesome. Like they introduce robotics to young children. And Lagos State government schools are actually free for all. So, and using these initiatives now, they teach students about robotics, computer science, even programming. And we all know that that's like the basics, even if it's still in its early stages. But from what I've seen, it's what I mean. I saw just one student doing Corel Draw like professionals, and I was impressed. So first things first, if we want things like this to move, yeah, especially when it comes to space education, we need to get policies right. Yeah, we need to have people in those places that can actually move the government to create enabling policies first to make sure that, okay, yes, we place much emphasis on STEM. You get, and for people that don't have access to, that don't have money, the best ways by which they can be touched by these programs is through federal government intervention or government intervention. Do you get? So that's why we need to have people in those places that will push for policies to be created like that. And again, I think that's a major thing, Sha. Yes, we need to have people that will push for, because the government doesn't actually see, the government probably doesn't see any real need for space education, to be honest.
Yeah. Yeah.
They don't actually see, because if they do, the way they will pump money into that sector, but because of the fact that they feel like it's not bringing much money. Do you get? So
yes.
So by the time they now start seeing that, okay, guys are already coming up, or maybe like you already have startups that are bringing so much cash in and everything like that, that's when their eyes will now start shining. Like what we had in fintech.
Yeah.
When Paystack and the rest came, they now started saying that, they now started saying that, oh, these guys are bringing much cash, so let's try and dabble into it and stuff like that too. So
All right.
that's what I have to say, Sha.
Thank you, David. That was a very good contribution. We need more space advocates. We need people to lobby. We need people to lobby to promote space education, not just in Nigeria, but all over Africa. Thank you so much. I really want to appreciate everybody for taking out the time to join us for today's webinar. It has been so enlightening. It has been interesting, and I appreciate your presence. If you have further questions, we have to keep to the time. It's a 1-hour session and we have almost exhausted our time. But if you have questions, if you have concerns, you can always reach out to me. You can check me on LinkedIn, Nelly-helen Neji Ebruka. It's as simple as that. I'll also send my email to the chat, so you can always send me an email, or if you have questions, you want to get involved in space, or you want to work with Space Ops Africa, know what we do more, you can always connect with us. And finally, you can always connect with our speaker. I'll also send her full name on the chat box. You can connect with her on LinkedIn to follow up on her work, to appreciate her, to tell her the session was good, because I know the session was very enlightening and very good. So thank you so much once again for your time. It was really great to have you join us. Have a lovely evening wherever you are, and see you next on our next Space Convo series by June. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you so much, Helen, and thank you to your audience as well. I look forward to their extra questions.
Okay, thanks.